Welcome to this exam prep video series on AZ-305, Designing Microsoft Azure Infrastructure Solutions. My name is Andreas Refeld. I'm a Microsoft Technical Trainer and I will be guiding you through this video series. Let's review where the exam prep session fits within your certification journey. You may have taken official Microsoft training, either self-paced, online, or instructor-led. You should also have experience in Azure administration, advanced experience and knowledge of IT operations, experience with Azure development and DevOps. Then comes this video, the official exam prep. This set of videos is meant to help you prepare to take the exam by covering what types of questions you may see, what topics might be covered, and what resources you can use to study. Following these videos, you should plan to study the topics you identified during viewing. There's a variety of resources available for you, including labs, documentation, practice assessment, and more. On the videos page, you will find a number of resources, such as the study guide. After your self-study, you should proceed with taking the exam. So let's now discuss objectives of this video series. This video series should help you to identify what will be covered in the exam, determine which concepts to prioritize for further study, explain the different potential exam question formats. It will also help you to learn what you are expected or can expect to review on the exam. But it won't teach you these topics in detail. You should expect to spend some more time viewing these studying areas you identified that required more learning. Let's take a look at the objective domain for that exam. Let's review the functional groups, skills measured that will be covered in this exam. In an objective domain exam, functional group or skills measured, there are main groupings of topics and concepts included into the test. This exam has 4 functional groups or skills measured: design, identity, governance and monitoring solution, design data storage solutions, design business continuity solutions, design infrastructure solutions. You will say that all these 3 groups have a relative weightage on them, shown in the percentage. If you say that one is like group 4, a little bit higher in the percentage, it doesn't mean that you can leave out any of the remaining or the ones with fewer percentage. You will have to provide in the end knowledge of all these functional groups going to the exam. So if you look into functional group number 4, you might say that percentage also reflected on the exam. So that is one of the more important areas in this exam. Let's start to get into contact with the first functional group and the skills measured there. Our first group is about designing identity governance and monitoring solution. Within these groups, we will revisit design a solution for logging and monitoring, design authentication authorization solutions, design governance. Let's begin with the first topic of the functional groups. Azure Monitor is a common monitoring data platform that includes metrics, logs, traces, and changes. It monitors the data sources shown in the illustration. Sources of monitoring data from Azure application can be organized into tiers, with the highest tiers being the application itself and the lower tiers being like components of the Azure platform. The method of accessing data from each varies. Azure has 3 tiers. Azure Tenant comprised of data about the operation at tenant level Azure services, such as the Azure Active Directory. Azure Subscription comprised of data related to the health and management of cross-resource services in Azure subscriptions, such as Resource Manager and Service Health. Azure Resource comprised of data about the operations performance of Azure resources themselves. Azure cloud and all on-premises might be following tiers. So there might be an operating system guest comprised of data about the operating system on the compute resources. Application code comprised of data about the performance and functionality of the actual application and code, including performance traces, application logs, and user telemetry. Custom source comprised of data from external services or other comprised of devices. Let's revisit log analytics a bit more. What is the difference between Azure Monitor, Log Analytics? Azure Monitor builds on the Log Analytics, the platform service that gathers log and metric data from all your resources. The easiest way to think about Azure Monitor is the service marketing name, whereas Log Analytics is the technology that powers it. One example of that could be, it is very important on a daily routine for an IT administrator in assessing system update requirements and planning patches. Accurate scheduling here can be crucial, as it directly relates to SLAs to the business and can seriously impact business functions. In the past, you had to schedule an update with only limited knowledge of how long the patching would really take. Operations Management Suite collects data from all our customers, performing patches, and uses that data to provide you an average patching time for a specific missing update. This use of crowdsourced data is unique to cloud system, and it's a great example of how log analytics can help to meet strict SLAs better. Let's explore the different use case scenarios. Starting with Azure Monitor, Azure Monitor is especially useful if you need a solution collecting, analyzing, acting on telemetry from cloud and on-premises environments, as you can see here. The second kind of candidate service is Application Insights. Application Insights, you need to measure and experience, analyze user behavior, or you have an external facing data and you want to say like the experience in consuming it, then you can go for the Application Insights. It's also useful if you want to see transaction diagnosis, performance statistics client server, or you need information on request rate, response times, and failure rates of an application. Here's an example how we use this feature inside Microsoft. We just recently moved a public-facing website that we use on a daily basis behind an Azure front door service, and collected some data about the availability of that app during the move. With help of Application Insights, we got a view on dependency codes compared to statistical values and the client experience data at the same time. This allowed us to provide the service availability, meeting our SLAs provided for the consumer of that application. So Azure Workbooks are another mean. You especially will use them if you need data analysis and the creation of rich visual reports, which can be exported in different formats. If you need to edit or just run log queries, you can simply use the things that you find inside Log Analytics for that purposes. Let's explore when to use Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory Services is offering you the possibility to establish a single enterprise directory for managing identity, including your full-time employees and enterprise resources. A single authoritative source for identities increases clarity and consistency for all roles in the IT and security. Using a single authoritative source allows teams to make changes in one place and have the effect everywhere. Designate a single Azure Active Directory instance directory as the authority source for corporate and organizational accounts. Don't synchronize other accounts to the Azure Active Directory that have high privileges in your existing Azure Active Directory domain services instance. Use modern password protection offerings. Let's revisit some authentication in Azure Active Directory. A core functionality of Azure Active Directory is authenticate users when they sign into a device, application, or service. To improve security, Azure Active Directory provides self-service password resets. This feature allows users to change their password on a web browser from pretty much any device, which is especially useful when the user has forgotten their password or their account is locked. Azure Active Directory multi-factor authentication. This is a feature that chooses an additional form of authentication during the sign-in, such as a phone call, a mobile app notification. This ability reduces the requirement for a single fixed form of secondary authentication, like a hardware token. Hybrid integration to write password changes back to the on-premises environment and enforce password protection policies for an on-premises environment. Azure Active Directory password protection can be integrated with an on-premises Active Directory environment. A component installed on the on-premise environment retrieves a global banned password list, a custom password protection policy from Azure Active Directory, and the domain controllers use them during the password change process. This hybrid approach makes sure that whenever, how, or where a user changes their credentials, only strong passwords can be used. Passwordless. This feature allows you to sign in with passwordless methods within credentials are provided by using a method like biometrics with Windows Hello for Business or FIDO security key, FIDO2 security key. These authentication methods cannot easily be duplicated by an attacker. Let's find out about identities and access management. Azure Active Directory provides identity management with a seamless user experience, access to resource when the following criteria is satisfied: allowed by role-based access control, verified by conditional access, monitored by Active Directory, Azure Active Directory Identity Protection, and confirmed by Azure Active Directory access reviews. You can opt to use several methods that you see on the slides. Azure Active Directory, Azure Active Directory business-to-business integration, Azure Active Directory business-to-consumer integration. Be aware of selecting in which kind of scenario. So if you're looking for something that manages identity for employees in cloud and hybrid, then you probably go with Azure Active Directory. If you look for collaborating with external, you rather look into Azure Active Directory business to business or Azure Active Directory business to consumer, depending on what are the external identities. Let's revisit how to design Azure keywords. Azure Keyword provides you a secure storage area for managing all your app secrets so that you can properly encrypt the data in transit or where it is in rest. A keyword provides a lot of benefits. So one of the benefits is it will restrict access policies that are tailored to the application and individuals that need to retrieve some content out of a keyword. It will centralize your secret storage And if you ever have to do a change to one of them, it will happen in only one place that you know of. It will also give you an extended access and logging and monitoring integrated to understand how and when secrets were accessed or have been accessed. Implementing customer managed key services will also most of the time involve such an Azure keyboard to be deployed. So you can say in comparison, the separation of sensitive data from your configuration and the code base, and thereby the reduce of the risk to accidental leak them out is one of the benefits of keyboard. Let's understand a little bit more the application access control integrated with Microsoft Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory solutions for identity and access management. If we look into Azure Active Directory, it's a multi-tenant cloud-based directory and identity management service. The Azure Active Directory helps to centralize the identity management, establish a single Azure Active Directory instance, and use, for example, Azure Active Directory Connect or Azure Active Directory Connect Cloud Sync for hybrid synchronization of identities. We have also the possibility to use service principals. They represent an entity that is probably requiring some access to resources, and it is secured by the Azure Active Directory tenant. It defines access policies and permissions for applications in the Azure Active Directory tenant. So you can preset the permissions that you want to hint. A shared access signature provides secure delegated access to resources in Azure Storage, in a storage account, for example. With shared access signatures, you have granular control how a client can access your data. For example, what resources the client may access, what permissions they have on these resources, and how long this access is valid. Resources that support the usage of an assigned managed identity allow you to enable or disable managed identity on a resource level. Use role-based access control to grant permissions, and view create, read, update, delete CRUD operations in the Azure Activity Log. View sign-in activity in the Azure Active Directory sign-in logs. Let's revisit how to govern resources in Azure. Governance provides mechanisms and processes to maintain control over your application and resources in Azure. Governance involves determining your requirements, planning initiatives, and setting strategic priorities. Management groups can help you to manage access, policies, and compliance for multiple subscriptions. Subscriptions are a logical container that serve as a unit of management and scale. Subscriptions are also a billing boundary. Resource groups. Resource groups are logical containers in which Azure resources are deployed for resource management as well. Resources are instances of a dedicated service that you create. For example, a virtual machine, a storage account, or a storage service, and an Azure SQL database. Let's revisit some consideration about Azure policies now. Consideration for Azure policies is apply them at the highest scope possible, know when policies are evaluated, decide to do something if you find a non-compliant situation, and also consider to automatically remediate non-compliant resources. Use Azure policies, compliance dashboard, and auditing to review such activities. Eventually combine Azure policy with, effectively So combine Azure policies with the role-based access control. They can go hand in hand. If you want to have one example for the usage of that, you probably can limit down the available sizes for virtual machines by saying you want to go with a dedicated SKU out of a policy. You can apply tags if you want to use them for billing later on and for internal recharge of costs. And the last bit is probably you can kind of also see whether you have a violation against the compliance need that you're running under with help of these policies. Let's revisit some important aspects about the IT governance now. So we have conditional access. This is a tool in Azure Active Directory that allows us very granularly to deny and allow access to resources. We also can apply additional things when a user signs in about where the user can be located at a time. So what is allowed locations, or from which device that user is communicating to us. And it also is a great way to incorporate with conditional access and multi-factor authentication together to make up a clear situation, and based on that, deny the access or allow the access based on the signets we see. We can consider that is giving us a very granular control, and that should be something that you are used to. We can allow something like access only for managed device, approved client applications. We can also think about blocking access in some situations, or block the use of a protocol like legacy authentication protocols, for example. And then we have also some simulations about just reporting the potential effect with report only, or use the what if tool to simulate a situation overlogging. Identity protection now is a tool that allows organizations to accomplish major three key tasks: to automate and delegate the remediation of identity-based risk, to investigate risk by using data in Azure portal, export risk detections to other tools and systems, like, for example, a security operations center. Consider the following when you use identity protection. So you should consider to use the high threshold for user risk policies, medium and above threshold for the sign-in risk policies, and you should on a regular basis investigate on the risk that is reported in the Azure portal. And you can also think about exporting your risk data continuously to have them available longer. The last bit is access reviews. It is informed to ensure that the employees and the users always have like a least privilege approach in access. An Azure Active Directory access review is planned to review access needs, rights, and also the historical use of some granted user access. Consider the following if you plan out for that. So what are potential reviewers? How often should such a review take place? How will the reviewers be notified? And also, what will be the effect on the users? And will they be notified at that point? Yeah. So having said that, now let's review some practice questions about our functional group. Let's now test on your preparedness for some practical question. It's worth mentioning that the upcoming questions are a bit different from the ones that the actual exam holds. These questions are meant to serve as a review of topics we discussed and help to give you an idea of the level of knowledge you need for the exam. Remember that the real exam is about applying the knowledge. So the question on exams will often give you a mini scenario, ask you what to do and what you would do in such a case. For a closer experience on the actual exam, I strongly encourage you to check the official practice assessment. Let's come to question number 1. What solution would be best for users signing the terms requirements? A. Create a user risk policy. B. Create a sign-in risk policy. Require an access review C option. In this case, it is create a sign-in risk policy. So this is for the sign-in situation and some requirements you want to bring up there and check back on the according action that you have to highlight if you go to an exam for such a question. Let's go to question number 2. Which of these levels are part of a typical Azure hierarchy? Choose the correct answers. Management group is A, B is subscription, C is resource groups, D is resources, and E is service principals. Good job. So a lot of you found the correct answer. So everything except the service principals are normally part of the hierarchy in an Azure environment. That includes management groups, subscription, resource groups, and the resources themselves. So this was a good kind of finding, and then you can use such an hierarchy. Let's go and revisit what we talked about in this functional group. In functional group number 1, we reviewed an overview about Azure Monitor, what log analytics is. We looked at some use when to use the Azure Active Directory, how authentication in Azure Active Directory works, what is the identity and access management, how to design for a keyword, what is application access control that comes integrated with Microsoft Azure Active Directory, how to govern resources in Azure, what consideration you have to take for Azure policies, and consideration for the identity governance in general. That brings us to the end of functional group number 1. We hope to join us in functional group number 2, designing data storage solutions.